Welcome, mothers and others. We're so glad that you all are here tonight. I'm so excited about this webinar because I have been waiting weeks and weeks and weeks to have a conversation with JohnLyra. JohnLyra is running, is a candidate. He's running for Texas 23rd Congressional District, which includes much of San Antonio and all of southwestern Texas, excluding El Paso. It also includes Uvalde, and it is a huge district. John is a fourth-generation Texan who grew up in a working-class family and has served our nation in the Marine Corps. Welcome, John. We're so glad you're here. Uh-oh, we're on mute.
Something always happens, right? It's obligatory. Well, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with you and all the members of Mothers Against Greg Abbott and all the supporters, and just happy to be here with you all. I've been tracking y'all's important movement. It's so needed at this point, and I love seeing some of the billboards and some of the ads that y'all are helping to get out there. So thank you for all that you do. It's an honor to be with you and the entire team.
Yes. So John, you have one of these races that I've been hearing a lot about. Been traveling all over Texas, and everybody tells me, can't wait for you to meet JohnLyra. He is fabulous. So I'm so excited that you're here. Can you tell us a little bit about you and why you're running for office and what you hope to accomplish if you are elected as a congressman?
Absolutely. An honor to do so. Well, I'm a San Antonio boy, fourth generation Mexican-American, as you said, but grew up right here in Southeast San Antonio, went to East Central High School, and we grew up in a working class family, a family that was far from rich, but only a paycheck from being broke most times, and parents who would work every hour of overtime that their employers allowed them to work. My story really begins my senior year of high school, where I did the most consequential decision of my life. I raised my hand and enlisted into the United States Marine Corps. That planted the seed of service and also started a career that lasted 11 and a half years, including 2 combat tours to Iraq. In the Marines, they gave me the job as an intelligence analyst. So I knew that this not only had value, and if you don't know what an intelligence analyst is, it's just basically giving decision makers like military commanders, providing them with the best information possible so that they can make the best battlefield decisions possible. So I knew that this was a very valuable skill to have, especially in our government for elected and appointed officials who are making important decisions about our nation and about our people. So I used my GI Bill like many great Texas veterans have, put it to work and hoping that it would provide me a pathway to the middle class. I became a student of political science, started off at a community college, San Antonio Community College, then got a degree also from the University of Texas at San Antonio. And ultimately, this busboy from the Riverwalk made it all the way to Carnegie Mellon University for my master's degree in public policy. So service opened up tremendous doors for me. While at Carnegie Mellon, I went to Washington, D.C. and was able to serve in the front lines of public policy now. I worked at AmeriCorps, where I was using the power of national service to help veterans and military families transition, just as I had. From there, I went to the U.S. Small Business Administration, where I was empowering veterans in an entirely new way, helping them to become entrepreneurs and small business owners, to open up that storefront and create jobs and sell products and sell services in their community. Was a great feeling to do that. Then I was on a commission that was created by Senator John McCain right before he passed away. It was called the National Commission on Military, National, and Public Service. And it was created at the beginning to answer one question, and that is, should women be required to register for the draft now that combat roles are open to women? As you could imagine, every person you ask would have a different opinion on that. And that's what we did. We traveled across the country with 11 bipartisanly appointed commissioners, asking groups of the religious community, of women's colleges, of students, of veterans, of active duty military, what was your idea of service to country? The commission came out with a beautiful bill. It had over 150 recommendations for the president and Congress called the Inspired to Serve Act. We launched it in March of 2020, right at the same time as what else was launched essentially on our country was COVID-19. But there was a congressman who took up our commission's bill and introduced it with bipartisan support. His name is Congressman Jimmy Panetta. And I spent much of 2020 working in Congressman Jimmy Panetta's office, trying to pass the bill that we had just helped write a couple of months before, and then managing his veterans, international affairs, and national defense portfolios. So that kind of explains the pathway that service has opened up for me. Now, why? Why am I running in one of the biggest congressional districts in the country, certainly in Texas? 29 total counties. If it was a state, it would be the 25th biggest state in our country. It's bigger than Pennsylvania, 820 miles of Texas-Mexico border. Well, it's because, we want to do, we're doing it because it is not hard, because it is hard, not easy. Texas 23 is one of the most consequential districts in our nation, and that's just a fact. What happens here not only impacts Texans, but impacts our nation, and in some cases, our international affairs as well. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. I had mentioned the 820 miles of Texas-Mexico border. A lot of the footage that we're seeing on the news repeated, usually on Fox News, of asylum seekers coming to our nation legally, using our laws to request asylum and being granted asylum or being granted legal permission to be here until they have their hearing. But that's happening right here in Texas 23 in Eagle Pass and in Del Rio, all the way up sometimes as far as El Paso County. We also, Texas 23 is also home to the tragic Uvalde shooting that occurred a couple of months back. And that rocked our community, it rocked our state, and it should have rocked our nation to the core. As an example of just a pinnacle of our rising gun violence and rising access to guns in our society. And also in El Paso, we have some of the poorest zip codes still. So we're at the forefront of the rural development in our nation, right here, Texas 23. So those are some of the challenges, but I want to just talk briefly about some of the opportunities because you mentioned how we can work together. Again, right there, Texas 23 residents should demand somebody who is right at the forefront of immigration reform, of an act to protect the dreamers and to have them a pathway to citizenship, of reforming our asylum laws, and of course, border security, so we can stop anti-narcotics, anti-human trafficking in and out of our country. So they want a representative who's not going to take a back seat, and certainly not one like we have now, who does nothing but belittle and devalue our border communities. He paints them as terrorist havens and as drug havens out there. Folks, these are women and children seeking humanitarian assistance. So imagine what his rhetoric is doing to the businesses out there that have to offer, the businesses that decide not to go and open in our border communities because of his rhetoric. Also, I always say in Texas 23, we have enough to fuel the country, to feed the country, and to fly the country. Those are three important industries for us. We do have, we are, I think, that one of the energy meccas of not only oil and gas, but wind and solar in our district as well. And we want to promote that industry with as clean as possible, as efficient as possible, but making sure that those jobs stay here in Texas for our residents as well. Also, we have enough ranches and farms that need a workforce. They're telling me when I go out to talk with them, why are we turning folks around at the border? I will give them a job. I will pay them. We can feed them. We can tax them, but we need them to revive our economy, not to be a drag on our economy. And then, of course, our aerospace. We're blasting people into outer space in a small little town called Van Horn, Texas, out in West Texas. There's one launch pad there now. Jeff Bezos wants to put 8 Blue Origin launch pads there now. So imagine the transformation that's going to happen in that small little rural town. And we should have a say as to how that transformation happens. So big things happening, but also big challenges. And we need a member of Congress, a U.S. representative out here who are going to be at the forefront of these issues, to have the courage to do what's best for our constituents, our residents here all the time, not just some of the time. And we're not getting that right now.
I absolutely agree with you. So I was born in El Paso, Texas. My parents still live in El Paso. When you're talking about border issues, I can definitely relate to a lot of things you're talking about. And I grew up outside of White Sands Missile Range in Las Cruces, New Mexico, which is, of course, now part of that whole entire new space industry that is happening, which is really exciting to see all of these things happening across the Southwest. So I think that the Southwest does have a lot of industry to offer Texas, and a lot of interesting things, like you had just mentioned, clean energy, along with farming, along with, space and oil and gas. So how would you represent your district in making sure that we bring good jobs to to your congressional district in Texas?
Thank you for that question. I think good job starts with good construction jobs, especially in our rural counties. You know, this census has shown us that I think 25 of our total 29 counties are shrinking and have shrunk in population over the last 10 years. That means we're having significant brain drain. That means the kids are going off to college, seeing the big city lights, getting dependable rural broadband, broadband and Wi-Fi, that they don't want to go back home to the farm or to take over the local hardware store or the family pharmacy. So we need to make sure that we empower these little rural communities. I think the best way to do it is by expanding work visas out here in West Texas. I think that's one of the best ways to do it because, again, we have migrants knocking on our door. All they want is an opportunity to prove themselves in the labor market. We are at a severe labor shortage out here in West Texas, especially on our ranches and farms, especially in our energy community, especially in our aerospace community. So imagine if we start, and that comes along with opening up some of these jobs, comes the other things that communities need to grow, right? Dilapidated houses has become rental properties, so more families start moving in. Maybe a new restaurant starts opening up. Maybe the new grocery store starts to open up. More and more housing comes in, more and more families, more and more commerce. So I think that's one way to kickstart them. Another way is just, again, we've passed a huge, Democrats and Republicans passed a huge infrastructure bill, and we have highways as old as Eisenhower out here, haven't been repaired, bridges that haven't been repaired. So we're working on ways to get that funding out here to fire up some of our local tractors, some of our local electricians, get them laying wires, and local plumbers, get them laying pipe again out here. So I think that's one of the key pathways to it, is to continue to invest through, again, opening up our labor, our temporary work visas, and allowing, again, migrants, giving them that opportunity that they want, inviting them, not dissuading them and treating them like problems to our nation, but inviting them in to empower our nation, to help boost our economy. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. They would have loved the opportunity, and so would the farmers and ranchers and warehouse owners out here. Also, I did work at the Small Business Administration, so I have to put in a huge plug for opening small businesses. These little downtowns, so many businesses shuttered. And Texans are some of the most entrepreneurial people I know. I mean, everybody has a side hustle, right? Everybody works their full-time job and then does something on the side as a little hustle where they sell something or they spend their time doing something else. So we want to empower small business. I would love to see more federally backed startup loans and scale-up loans in our rural communities, specifically for our rural communities.
Yeah, that would be excellent. So, so you were just talking about, like, bringing over migrants and developing a migrant worker program. I just want to tell you that I'm a granddaughter of a bracero. He was part of a migrant worker program way back in the 1950s, and I'm the granddaughter from that. We happened to get lucky enough that, that he came and he settled here in America after some time. And I was lucky enough to go to college and graduate school, kind of probably similar to you, just having that immigrant experience that came from my grandparents. And I was able to, build a wonderful life for myself now. So let's talk about border issues. And primarily right now, what is happening in Texas is just some abhorrent behavior by Governor Abbott, where he is using some of these migrants that are coming over legally and checking in and going through the federal process legally. And then he's putting them on buses to go to other states and go to other cities like DC and Martha's Vineyard and Chicago. And it's just embarrassing. Honestly, it's embarrassing that we have a governor doing some of these things. It's shocking. But what is also shocking and not surprising is his behavior, how he's using this as a way that he can get reelected. It's just disgusting. So but right now in the border, I'm seeing a lot of tension around the border. Like, we feel like we might lose some votes in the border because his rhetoric is really resonating with people who live along the border, and it's really resonating. So I'm concerned about that. So what can we do about securing the border, promoting solutions that work for everyone, and making sure that we treat people who are seeking asylum with respect and not political pawns? all while we support our Texas economy.
Absolutely. I think what you hit the nail on the head. What Greg Abbott has done by making these migrants, and again, this is right from the center that's right down the street from me. Our office is very close to the Migrant Processing Center. Absolutely despicable. You know, it's below him. You know, there's no sense towards solution. You know, there's no sense towards having any empathy for what these folks are doing. Again, they're here legally. They've been approved to be here. They've been approved to connect with their families. And they didn't agree to be part of his reelection campaign and to pose as props. So completely despicable. I actually definitely condemn that in further actions, him and Ron DeSantis. You mentioned the border. I mean, Republicans profit politically from a broken border. Just remember, Greg Abbott has been in office for the last 8 years. Rick Perry before him has spent billions and billions of dollars of Operation Lone Star and something similar before that, which has been a complete failure. It pains me that our National Guardsmen and women, are still suffering some of the worst elements of it. You know, we just got our 4th suicide not too long ago, which is heartbreaking. As a veteran, that's heartbreaking to me because there's no mission in sight. They're just there doing, very stressful firewatch. They're dealing with the most sensitive of humans and the most sensitive conditions. Asked sometimes, not even asked to put their lives at risk, but sometimes willing to put their lives at risk. So this is what I think of the border. I think there's 5 issues totally at play, and I'm ready to address any single one of them individually or as part of a comprehensive plan. One is that our asylum laws are old and outdated. They must be reformed. They did not envision 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 person caravans at this point. I would like to see an increased investment in refugee processing centers along the border. If we can have some in some of our in-state, so where they can initiate a process, whether it's not in the state where they're experiencing the threat against them, but in one of the other countries, at least to get the process initiated a little bit sooner before they put feet on the ground here in the U.S. It worked in Haiti under the Bill Clinton administration, and I think that it could be valuable here for us as well. But yes, don't have the Border Patrol processing migrants in a cubicle. They are trained law enforcement. They are a tool of the U.S. government, and if they are not doing their job or their mission is wrong, then we need to figure out what that mission is and readjust. But they need to be out there because they want to keep the peace and they really want to stop the bad guys also who are coming in with drugs and human trafficking. That's what we need to stop. But anyways, we'll get back to it. This next is our regular pathway to citizenship. If somebody across our cousins or our aunts or our nephew has waited 10 years to hear anything back on his visa application, that's a problem because they're going to choose other legal routes if there's legal routes that are not available to them. We saw this in the most extreme case in San Antonio where there was a tractor trailer with over 53 dead migrants ultimately right here crossed through our district in Texas 23. So we must have more legal pathways. 2, as I mentioned, we must have more work visas programs here so that if they do not qualify for asylum, at least we can offer them a job, a roof over their head, and the ability to make some income and kickstart our economy. Next, I would say we need to invest in our ports of entry. Mexico right now is building super highways into our ports of entry in Texas, and Texas 23 has 5 of them. But what are they being met with on the other side? A little 2-lane road. These ports contain almost $5 billion a day of binational trade, and we want to keep that going. Again, this is what keeps our prices down. This is what keeps inflation down. This is what keeps small businesses and farmers sustainable, is sending goods to Mexico and receiving goods from Mexico. So we've got to invest in our ports and make sure, again, which is the 5th piece, the anti-smuggling piece. We do want to keep out those deadly drugs. We do want to keep out folks who are smuggling humans into our country. And we do want to keep out weapons, although I feel it's more of our weapons going into Mexico versus Mexico's weapons coming into the U.S. So I'm ready to make progress on any one of those 5 issues. They are all at play at the border right now. The first 4, the migrants that are legally claiming asylum, the migrants, the immigrants who are illegally applying for a visa, the workers, and the ones who come for commerce, for commercial purposes, we want those in our nation. We just want to keep out the bad folks. So there's plenty of opportunity there to use, like I said, to leverage their will for an opportunity, to take advantage of an opportunity to help us rebuild our Western economy, especially here out in Texas.
Yes. So your opponent, Tony Gonzales, has gone to Congress and he's voted against your district over and over again on numerous issues that could really help Texans. So can you outline some of those issues and how they would have helped your community had he voted for them instead of against them?
Absolutely. In many cases, he's voting against them and then taking credit for them and riding on the coattails of the Democratic Congress once they pass. But one of his first ones was the American Rescue Plan, ARPA. Again, this brought emergency funding to every county and every municipality in the state of Texas. Emergency funding that mayors and judges were putting this towards keeping the hospital running, for paying staff for overtime, for giving staff time off for some of the overtime that they had to work prior to that. This was needed at a time that also came with the stimulus checks. That also came with our child tax credit, which helped out many families, especially along the border area. So that was one of his first mistakes. Then the bipartisan infrastructure bill. This is something that promises to bring $13 billion of infrastructure investments into Texas alone. Like I said, Texas 23 could benefit the most from it. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act, when here in Texas, the legislator passed the most oppressive voting rights law throughout the nation. He voted against the formula bill. He voted against to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act. He voted against the Protecting Our Kids Act. He's voted against so many things. Again, that if he was in tuned to the people that he was representing in the district and the communities that he was representing, he would not have voted against. But again, he went up there to not lead, but to get in line. And this is what happens when you see a representative who goes up there again to lead, to follow and not to lead.
So Tony Gonzales also is like you. He was a veteran, the same as you. So what are some of the key differences that you can think of between you and Tony Gonzales, just right off the bat? Name like a couple of really key differences that matter to your constituents.
Yeah, I think I'm more connected to the struggles of working class families. Tony Gonzales, to commend his 20 years of service in the military, was insulated for a lot of the struggles of working class families. He never had to pay for childcare. He never had to pay full price at groceries because he had the commissary. He never had to struggle with being laid off and going on unemployment and wondering how you're going to get your next paycheck. Even as a veteran, I got out in 2010. And I used the VA medical system up until now, 10 or 20 years of experience with this. Tony Gonzales just got out and ran. He doesn't, again, not connected with the real struggles of the VA. He never had to wait in long lines, like we have. Also, my experience in government. Again, I wanted to continue serving my country at the forefront of public policy. And I was trusted to run national veterans transition programs at AmeriCorps and at the SBA, and I was trusted to write national level legislation on Capitol Hill and in the commission. So I've seen the process. I don't need a tour of the underground tunnels on Capitol Hill. I've worked there and I've been there before, and I'm ready to leverage all these experiences to solve the biggest problems that we have here in Texas 23 for my neighbors. So on paper, we might look alike, but our experiences are very different. And again, I'm ready to put, my resume or my vision for the district against his any day of the week. I've challenged him to a debate, actually challenged him to 4 topical debates, because this is the people of Texas 23 seat, and they deserve to hear from their candidates side by side so they can make an informed decision. I have heard nothing back since. I think it's already going on 20 days now. So, I want to be side by side so that the people of Texas know exactly where Tony Gonzales I stand and exactly what the difference between he and I am.
Yes. Does he have any town halls? Does he ever have any town halls in your area at all?
No, I've never seen a public announcement from Tony Gonzales. From what I understand, they're all privately arranged meetings. Even his teletown halls, you get a call and it says, "Hey, wait on the line for 10 seconds and you're going to be joined into this call." I mean, people don't have time to plan. It's just kind of a drive-by type of approach. His absence in the district is noticeable, and it's been noticeable for every county that I've been to, and I've been to all 29 counties. So, it's hard to get name recognition across this big, vast district, and he failed to do it. And so we're on that aspect, we're about equal because we've been hitting the district pretty hard and putting boots on the ground in all 29 counties to develop these relationships that we're going to need to flip this seat.
Yeah, absolutely. So one area you mentioned it earlier in your district is Uvalde. So let's take a minute. Let's talk about. I've been seeing a lot of photographs with you and our friend, Texas Senator Roland Gutierrez. You guys were in Uvalde together recently, so I was seeing your pictures on social media, and I know that Uvalde is part of your district, and you've been very supportive of the Uvalde families who've died, who've lost loved ones with this gun violence. So I want to hear from you as to what your positions are on gun safety and what you would do if you were elected as a congressman for your district to take gun safety seriously and support the families in your district, especially including those in Uvalde.
Thank you for that question. And it's been, nobody asked for this, right? No, and the families themselves, the Uvalde community never asked for this tragic event. But what this tragic event has done is not only upended this community and these families, but it's brought national attention, to kind of the real invasion. The real invasion is not really on our southern border. It's the invasion of firearms into our communities, the access where there's more out there, more floating around, and more greater ability to cause gun violence. That first day, we stopped campaign operations, and I just felt like I needed to be in Uvalde and just be there with the family. We didn't interrupt what they were doing. It was a very tense night. It was a very heavy night, but we wanted to just be there, just to kind of show support, show solidarity, grieve with them. But these families have turned from grieving to anger to now activism. The whole community has been awakened. And if they're voting and they're energized to get out the vote this time around, Uvalde can go blue for an entire generation because of this horrible event. And not because, it's not because we just have a D by our name, that they're willing to vote for us, but it's because we've taken the time, like you mentioned. Roland Gutierrez has taken the time to show up. I've showed up. Beto O'Rourke has showed up. We've taken the time to show up and to get to know the families, to get to hear the community. I was there for the march. I was there for the vigil. I was there for the president. I was there for the rally. And we know what they want. So this is exactly what I'd fight for. And I'll tell you we're going to celebrate election night in Uvalde, so I can be there with the community. Because if I am congressman-elect, that first minute, I want to be right there with them, formulating a strategy or how I'm going to introduce my first bill, which I hope to be a gun violence bill that responds directly to what happened at Robb. So that's one of the first things. But what would be in that bill? Again, what do the families want? They want a simple age increase from 18 to 21 to buy military style, high capacity, high velocity, semi-automatic military rifle. I don't think that's much to ask. Again, I'm a veteran of war. I've seen what these weapons can do to my enemies and my friends alike in battle. I absolutely don't believe they should be in the community. I know that some of the family want an all-out assault weapons ban, and that is something that I would support. I would stand with the families on that aspect. And here's the main reason why. Because in the military, we have a term called fire superiority. That means we win battles by putting down more rounds of ammunition than the enemy can. Allowing access to these weapons in society allows the average public to overwhelm and have fire superiority over our law enforcement, over the very people that we have charged in society to protect us. So again, giving anybody in public the ability to overwhelm our average police officer, men and women in uniform who have been put in society to protect us. I don't think that's right. And I want to stand up for them. This came into play in Uvalde. We saw that those men and women in uniform didn't want to go charging into a room where there was hot steel coming at them. And that's an unfortunate it was, again, a failure on many parts. And I understand that systemically, there's been many failures for these families in Uvalde. And wouldn't it be a breath of fresh air if we could elect candidates, again, who will listen to them and work with them to put forth the laws and the rules and the changes that we need to prevent the next Uvalde, next Robb Elementary, and the next Santa Fe High.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the other hot topics right now, especially in Texas, especially within Mothers Against Greg Abbott, is the Dobbs decision and SB8 and the impact on women and their right to choose. So if you were elected into office, would you do your best to help codify Roe v. Wade and allow women to get some of their personal freedoms and rights back?
Yes. Unequivocally, yes, I would absolutely vote for the Women's Health Equality Act. And I say this, again, as we talked about briefly before, as a Catholic, as somebody who's, again, has heard, the rhetoric coming out from both sides, somebody who's dug into the facts as a student of political science, and somebody who is a father and an uncle. And where I fall is that I don't want any reproductive healthcare options to be off the table for my daughter and my nieces, or your daughter or your nieces. I want them to have the best option. I want them to have more options when it comes to reproductive healthcare. So I'm absolutely a fighter to have this procedure, again, to remain private. These conversations should not be anybody's, especially, instead of putting red flags on potential dangers with firearms, they put red flags on our young mothers, young red flags on young women, telling to the public that they would potentially win a $10,000 lawsuit if they turned in or snitched for somebody. So it's absolutely crazy what we're doing. We need to restore these rights. We need to restore these protections at the federal level. Again, the Republicans argued that this was all about states' rights, states' rights, states' rights. And then 2 weeks later, Lindsey Graham lets the cat out of the bag that no, given the opportunity, they want to federalize and make it a national ban against abortions. So again, this never had anything to do with state rights. So I absolutely support a woman's right to choose. I absolutely support a doctor and that conversation happening. I want it to be as safe as possible. Again, I'm not advocating for more abortions because I think it's one of the toughest decisions that a woman would ever have to make. But at the same time, that I believe wholeheartedly that is my daughter's decision, that is my niece's decision, that is my cousin's decision for her to make herself. Who am I to determine how many children she should have and when? So I absolutely will support. I'm happy to carry that banner into battle on the floor of the House chamber on behalf of Texas women, because again, Texas, this has some crossover appeal, and we're seeing it on the door. We're hearing at the doors. We're seeing it in polling, because Texas is the right of rights and freedom and liberty. And Texas, even conservative women know that they have lost, that a right and a liberty has been stripped of them. They know that in New Mexico, those women have more rights than they do, as our right-loving, as Texans who love our liberty. So we're going to continue to fight, and I think our coalition is going to grow. I think that this was a huge overstep for the Supreme Court and a huge overstep for Republicans who have been pushing this for decades. We need the best reproductive and maternity care in America, not the last, not the worst.
Yeah, absolutely. So your background, you have a really strong background in working with veterans and helping them in small business areas. So what do you believe is the most important thing for veterans right now that you could do for veterans right now, and how can you assist them?
Well, thank you for that question. And one is I am so grateful for President Biden's finally signing the PAC Act, even after Republican shenanigans of trying to delay and block. My opponent, Tony Gonzales, was part of that in the House. We finally got that bill passed. And again, burn pits are my generation's, the global war on terrorism, the 9/11 generation's Agent Orange. I myself was exposed to toxins at one of the camps that I was stationed at, along with my buddy, Frank Pacheco. Now, Franco Pacheco passed away from glioblastoma, and he was 100% convinced that it was because of those burn pits that he and I both inhaled at Fob Heat in Iraq. So I'm grateful that this bill was passed. It's long overdue. It's going to expand tons of medical benefits for veterans who are exposed to toxins in combat. Two, you mentioned small business. I would love to make a small business component of the GI Bill. Back when it was originally envisioned as the Veterans Readjustment Act, it had some flexibility for not only housing and not only education, but also for veterans to open up a small business, a small startup capital. I would love to give veterans that ability again. They might not be on a path towards college, and then they lose that benefit that they've worked so hard for. But what if they want to start up that business, or they want to open up that second storefront? I think that their GI Bill should be utilized to allow them to do that. Also, again, I think in Texas 23 especially, but this is probably true for all veterans living in rural communities, it's hard to get to the VA hospital. It's hard to get to the VA clinic. Clinics, I go out here to a small town and I say, how is your VA system? And he says, it works great. There's a person there every other day. 2 days out of the week, we have somebody there. That's not great. So I would love to do public-private partnerships between the VA and some of the civilian or the private sector medical facilities, make it maybe a hero wing or a warrior wing so that we can add, we won't compete with the local hospital, but actually we're adding on and building on to their capabilities. And then services will be interchangeable. Again, so now we're just building on to an existing hospital versus building a brand new $1 billion hospital that's only going to pool nurses and doctors from the other hospital. So that's one of the things I want to do. I want to make up more VA programs because then we can get rotational doctors out there, doctors and nurses and physicians assistants so that we could expand rural America's access to there's a lack of health professionals out there. So if we can get the VA out there and we can hire some folks on rotation with the VA and these hospitals, I think it'll expand healthcare throughout West Texas. We're overrepresented with the veteran population here in Texas 23.
That's great. So have you, I'm going to just ask another kind of off question here. Jay Kleberg is also, he's running for general land commissioner, and he was really involved with the toxic pits bill, the PAC bill there in Congress for veterans. Have you worked together with him at all on just exchanging notes on how to help veterans in Texas?
Well, I tell you, meeting him, I didn't know that, the Land Commission did so much for veterans, with the Veterans Land Commission and some of the other benefits there. So I love Jay. We have exchanged notes, and we promised that once this craziness is all over, that we're going to sit down again and figure out what we can do for not only Texas veterans, but veterans across the country and getting them, some housing benefits or other ones that the state offers. But I tell you what, Jay, I've seen him all around West Texas. Every stop that I'm in some of the smallest communities out there, and we'll bump into each other. So he is really putting in the work. I want to use this time to put in the plug for our entire Texas, our slate of statewide Texas candidates. Yeah. I love it when Beto was in the district. I love running into Susan Hayes. I did a great event out in Marfa with Janet Dunning. Rochelle Garza and Eagle Pass with Beto. So what a great, tremendous slate. It's an honor to be on the ballot with every single one of them.
Yeah, it's an exciting slate this year. I mean, even including yourself, we have the candidates are great. It's so exciting to have so many awesome qualified candidates running for office right now, which is like, we need all of you to win. We really do. We need you all to win so we can do amazing things for Texans right now. So I get excited. Even listening to you talk right now is just like, we got to get him elected. So I'm with you 110%. So West Texas is part of your district. And what are your constituents, especially in the area around the Big Bend area? What is important for people who live in the West Texas? What's important for them, and what would you do for them if you were elected into office?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. I think these little small communities out in West Texas, they once were created and benefited from rail stops, old rail stops that were going from Mexico all the way up. And the state of Texas has the Ports to Plains program, but they want stuff like that. I visited the small town of Presidio in Presidio County, and they're essentially a suburb of Ojinaga. One of the residents told me, if it weren't for Mexico, Ojinaga on the other side, we wouldn't exist. They have the better grocery store, they have the better healthcare, but they do have a port of entry, and that port of entry has been down for 36 months. And they're screaming, pants on fire, help us get our port of entry up. Nobody's paying attention to us out here. We can, have the full benefit of, alleviating some of the backup that's now going to New Mexico. It can come into Texas. Like if they just had an inspector, their avocados wouldn't have to go to New Mexico, to Dallas, and then back to them 2 weeks later, costing $8. That's an actual complaint of theirs. But like a small town like Terlingua, right? It's basically right outside of the Big Bend National Park. They have tourists coming round the clock, but they don't have the infrastructure to support it. It's running them ragged. Their tourist industry is growing faster than their infrastructure can keep up with. And we want them to keep going and experiencing beautiful Big Bend area, but we got to make sure that little towns like this are invested in. These are beautiful little treasures out here. But a lot of it absolutely has to do with rural development type stuff. I'll give you one example. Actually, the city of Pecos in Reeves County. I mentioned a lot of cities that are shrinking in population. Pecos is in a full boom. There's full activity everywhere. And guess what they are? There's a lot of they're oil trucks. They're still in the oil boom right now. And it's one of the few places in our district that is growing, their county tax base. They're building schools, they're building parks, they're building, they're doing a lot, but it's kind of that rare thing, But again, they have one of the most deadliest stretches of highways in the entire country because of all these oil 18-wheelers, right? Even they can benefit from some infrastructure, some rural development, some wider roads, maybe 3-lane highways, maybe a trucker-only lane or something to that extent. So a lot of it is a rural. I'm from San Antonio. I'm kind of on the outskirts of it, so I'm not full inner city kid. But I will have to be a champion for rural America. San Antonio is growing, El Paso is growing, Eagle Pass is growing. There's certain areas that are growing, but a lot of them are shrinking. And that's how I plan to reach out an olive branch to Republicans. A lot of them represent rural America. If they care about invigorating and kind of getting our agriculture and our rural economies up to a boost, I'm ready for it. I'm ready to partner with them. And that goes to our ranchers and our farmers as well.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, because you just kind of mentioned it about energy, and you have this whole strip where there's a lot of diverse energy going on in this part of Texas, right? You have the oil industry, you have wind, you have solar. So what would you do if you were elected to U.S. Congress to help support Texas energy, especially looking forward into climate change and what we can do so Texas continues to be an energy leader?
Absolutely. So Texas is definitely an energy leader. We produce the largest amount of renewable energy. That's wind, of course. We're catching up to California and solar to lead the nation in that. But we're also one of the biggest emitters of carbon. So, we got to take the bad with the good. So I think that we continue to push towards carbon neutral, to carbon capture policies, because we have beautiful lands. In some cases, we have very sensitive lands. We have very delicate deserts out there. A lot of our businesses in Texas 23 are hunting tourism. Those ranchers want to keep the lands unpolluted. They want the drinking water, or the natural water, the natural springs to be unpolluted. It's the truth that Texas is getting hotter and getting drier every year. And that's the case for much of our country. That makes it more susceptible to fires. That makes it more susceptible to flash flooding. We've seen that before, where flash flood has completely recarved the Rio Grande Valley at one point in history. So there's those elements at play as well. I think, again, we continue to push. I like the president's plan to get to carbon neutral. I think it's by 2050, or reduce it in half. I think by 2050, I absolutely agree with that. I believe that the government should incentivize households and Americans to switch towards cleaner energy. I like the stuff that was in the Inflation Reduction Act that expands on, investments in residences, right? If you get those energy efficient windows, if you get solar on the roof, you get some tax credits for that. Even commercial industry gets some tax credits. So I do think we continue to make investments just like that in innovation and innovative energy. We have to get our energy prices down. We saw what happens with our foreign reliance on oil. I don't think that it all must come from oil. I think that we have plenty of resources. I'll tell you one thing also, back out in one of our counties, Hudspeth County, in the little small unincorporated town of Sierra Blanca, they found 16 of the world's 17 rare earth minerals out there. And that is about to be mined and to come online within a matter of 2 years or so. This is stuff like beryllium that will go into military stealth technology, chips, semiconductors. So again, we've got to think smart about this, because this is a great find for our nation, and it could open up a domestic semiconductor market, which the Inflation Reduction Act invested in. So direct benefit here. But again, we've got to do it in a moral way, in an ethical way, right? We've got to do it to make sure that we're not polluting any streams of drinking water for the residents there, that we're not being exploited, that some of the funding and the resources stays to invest in our communities that is being extracted from. So that is something that is that is going to be coming online in our district. And we're going to need a member of Congress who's not just going to go out there and see it as a free for all, but somebody who has, again, make sure that all the right steps are taken so that the community benefits just as much as our nation does from it.
So right now across the United States, especially with this current Supreme Court, we're seeing a lot of attacks on our 14th Amendment rights. And we have Senator John Cornyn posting on Twitter after the Dobbs decision just passed. He said on Twitter, now do Brown versus the Board of Education. And I just found that to be just infuriating, to tell you the truth, infuriating. So what could we do, and what would you do to protect the 14th Amendment, and how important is keeping the 14th Amendment as a federal policy? Because I think what we're seeing right now is they're starting to break it down to bring that power to the states and breaking down the federal power over the states, which is breaking down some of our privacy rights. So what would you do to ensure that we get to keep and secure our 14th Amendment rights?
Exactly that. We stand up for it. We use it as a shield and as a defense against those discriminatory policies that are coming out of states and our federal government. We continue to shine the light on it. There's always going to be elements. The March for Equality is not a destination. It's continuous. Our democracy, we saw how fragile it was on January 6th and through these subsequent committees. Had it not been for the courage of a few folks in a couple of tight spots or positions, I think our democracy could have been in peril. So I will always be a voice for the voiceless. I was, a minority in the federal government. I was a minority in the military. Didn't stop me for wanting to stand up, for equal treatment, for treatment of dignity. That includes women, again, who are facing the rights to bodily autonomy. Challenge to the LGBTQ community, who again always has to defend who they love and who they want to marry. It's happening across the board, and we need to stop that. Like I said, we fight for it. We don't stay silent. We don't sit on the sidelines for it. We see something going on where somebody is not provided an equal opportunity to pursue happiness, to pursue life, to pursue liberty. If they're having those instances denied, then we fight for it. This is our tool. This is what we can carry into the arena against these opposing forces that try to strip us of that. They're trying to take us back generations, centuries, after all the progress that we've made and trying to make and fight for a more equitable and a much more just society in our laws and our treatment and our employment biases. And to think that we're still battling the same battles of generation of Americans like us from generations back. So all this goes to prove that it is, equality, justice is something that we constantly strive for. In this land, it will never be a destination. We will never just rest on our laurels and say that we have it. We've got to fight for our democracy. We've got to fight for our individual liberties, and we've got to fight for our communities as well. I definitely believe in the individual and their ability to make the right choice. But I also believe in the camaraderie. And I, as a Marine, is something I've seen as a camaraderie of Americans, that we rally around each other on behalf of our nation to solve the biggest problems or to confront the biggest problem. So again, the 14th Amendment is an important tool to our nation. There's very few countries in the world that have anything similar to it. And we must protect it as a jewel. We must use it early and often if anybody's rights or equal access or due process is being stripped from them.
All right. So everybody's talking about how important this election is for not just the United States, but for Texas and for saving our democracy. So we know that this is like the most important election in Texas history. I believe I would willingly die on that hill. So right now, it's the most important election, and we have all types of voter suppression going on all over Texas at the moment. I'm dealing with some. I'm trying to get people to the polls right now. I mean, we're dealing with some in Walker County. We're dealing with some in Montgomery County. It's just all over the place. What is happening, and just getting people to the polls is hard work. So, what do you think is? I mean, how would you protect voters' rights if you were elected into Congress? And what are your feelings about the importance of this election? Sorry about my dog.
No, voting is the cornerstone of American democracy, and we must be protected. Anybody who tries to cast undue cost or burden or doubt on our election, it's un-American. And that's exactly what we have to stand up for. I like to tell folks, I was deployed in Iraq, and our main mission out there was to ensure that the Iraqi people had an election that was secure, transparent, uncoerced, unsupplanted. And never in a million years that I would have to come back home to Texas to fight for those same things for my fellow Texans. So absolutely, one is, we've got to, I think, pass the John Lewis and the For the People Act, for John Lewis Voting Rights Act in Congress, which is why it's so important for us to keep the Democratic House majority, because that bill will never come up again in a Democratic-held Congress. So we've got to definitely win this. But one, we start right here by winning this seat and picking up others that we have, some other ones at play that are red to blue. But I think we put those protections in, right? We know that early voting is very beneficial. It helps alleviate the lines. We know that there's a critical shortage right now also of election workers, because they're being intimidated, they're being attacked. These are public servants who have volunteered to serve as an election official or election monitor or election poll worker, and they're getting attacks, and they're feeling this is something that they should be proud of, to participate in our democracy. And many of them are not volunteered to it. We're having to try to register veterans to do that. So I like all the expanded access. I like the overnight polling stations. I love the 2 weeks of early voting, and you can vote at any location. I believe that people should be able to take, if there's should be able to transport people to a voting location. I don't think there should be harm in that. I think you should be able to give water to people who are standing in line. It's a basic human courtesy to give people a line, and maybe a snack if the lines are 2 or 3 hours long. These are all things that have seemed to become criminalized here. Again, though, we need to put in the protections to make sure our elections are not supplanted. I fear that if Republicans win the U.S. House, that it may be very difficult to confirm and to certify the next president, especially if they're a Democrat. This is what the reality that we've been living in now. And we've got folks that are running for Secretary of State all across the country who intend to do just that, undermine the processes they think don't work in their favor. So again, taking our country back generations, when we fought so hard to have, as in quotes, secretary's terms, one of the safest elections that our country has ever hosted last cycle in the 2020. So the fight is real. I've been endorsed by the Voter Protection Project for my commitment, and I'm ready to stand again. I'm ready to stand on that hill. And you're absolutely right. I think this is it for us. We're not going to have a Beto again. We're not going to have a great slate equal to what we have right now again. We're not going to have a lot of the elements that are at play, with the horrible Greg Abbott as governor. This is our time. This is our moment. This is our time to crescendo, to surge, and to finally make a statement here in Texas. And I think that the ground is shifting from a lot of what I'm hearing at the doors, a lot of what I'm seeing in the polls, so we've been putting in the work, and the enthusiasm is on our side. So we just got to fulfill our commitment and get ourselves, our neighbors, and our family members out to the polls this November.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Are you hearing from some Republicans that are ready to vote for you?
Absolutely. Oh, yes. We've started a moderate, I very early, I moved to consolidate my Democratic base, but always reaching out to moderates. I've done conservative media and podcasts, even some news interviews as well. So we've definitely been reaching out. And the main thing is nobody understands what Tony Gonzales stands for. Nobody knows where he's going to vote from one day to the next, or who Tony Gonzales is going to be, so that's his issue that he has to deal with. They know exactly where I stand. They know exactly the type of experience that I'm bringing to this, and they know that they'll have somebody that'll be a voice and a backbone for them in Washington, D.C.
That's excellent. Well, I can't wait until we get to elect you into office. I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to that party in Uvalde. That sounds like a great time. So I want to say thank you for spending so much time with us tonight. How best can we support you right now? Where can we find you? What do you need right now at this point in the election? What can we do for you?
Well, as any candidate, I wouldn't be worth my salt if I didn't do a call to action and make an ask. But there's three ways essentially, and this is for all campaign: vote, volunteer, and donate. If you are in Texas 23, this is an extremely close race. It's actually turned into a 3-person race. There's a very far right candidate who's joined in and who's actively pulling the more Trumpy votes away from Tony Gonzales. So he's actually helping us out. If he pulls enough of that vote away, he's going to send us to Congress, just like in Alaska. But also, we are on all platforms. We are on Twitter at lyraforcongress.com, Instagram, and Facebook. We are very active. We share information. We share where we're traveling, what we're doing. Please like us. Please follow. Please share. And of course, if you're able to, there's still time to make a significant impact on this race through a contribution. In a close race like this, every single bit will count. We'll put it to great use immediately. But this is a close race. This is an under the radar race, and we kind of like it that way. We have a Republican incumbent who's in trouble and failed to regain his footing post-Uvalde. We have a very aggressive third-party candidate. We have a campaign, my campaign, that has been hitting the streets and putting boots on the ground and building the relationships. And we've got Beto on the ballot, right? He's going to help Democrats with a little boost as well. So all these elements coming into play will help us wake up winners on November 9th.
I hope so. I hope God is listening, because we need this to happen. So I'm with you there. So thanks again for spending the evening with Mothers Against Greg Abbott. I can't wait to meet you in person and see you on the campaign trail. And we wish you a really happy evening. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was great being here. Great speaking with you. If any time, please never hesitate to reach out. And thank you for all the great work you and your members and your coalition is doing to shine the light on the biggest issues that we have here in Texas, which is out of touch governor. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. And for mothers and others, please go out there. Let's go do some great work for JohnLyra. He needs to get elected into office, all right? Let's go start knocking on doors. We have a couple more weekends left to just get the vote out, knocking on doors, and let's make this happen, because I think that we can elect him. So let's go out and do it. So I'm talking to everyone in San Antonio, everybody in the Valley, everyone from El Paso all the way down to Brownsville. Let's just make this happen. So thank you. Thank you so much, John, and we will see you on the campaign trail. Have a nice evening.